My question is going back to the unlearning of nationalism and what you said about it being painful for Palestinians, right, because the nationalism is the uniting factor against, when you're against rather than for. Don't know if that's clear, but it seems to me that what I call the undead two-state solution, which is still with us somehow, pretty smelly, but it's still there. And the reason it's still there, if you say two-state solution, probably in any Palestinian gathering, it would get the thumbs down. If you say negotiations on a two-state solution, it would be even lower down on the floor. But if you say Palestinian state, that gets a thumbs up, and it gets arousing support. And that is a kind of a dilemma of the struggle at the moment, it seems to me. I want to very controversially, actually, sort of ask whether you think BDS is on the nail in terms of its demands, in terms of the tactics, the creation of a movement, the creation of activism. It's fantastic, but aren't the slogans of the demands a bit removed from the current civil rights issues, which are to do with the rights of prisoners, freedom of movement, freedom of, I forget, anyway, all the civil rights issues of today, which you say must be, in a way, you've got a counterposition of the desire for a Palestinian state, which overrides the disappointments and the terrible shortcomings and wrongness of the two-state solution. But at the same time, the only alternative to it, the civil rights alternative, is not kind of inscribed on anybody's flag and is not actually being... Am I...
Can you phrase the question?
Yes, I'm trying to phrase the question. How do we get around that? How do we get around that? The question is, how do we bring civil rights forward?
It is the first demand, isn't it?
Equal rights for all. It's the first demand in BDS. It's the first
well,
objective.
No. Well,
Can we...
Okay, I think I got the gist.
Unpick it. How do we
I got the gist. I like to say three things about it. One is that it's until Oslo, until 1993, a Palestinian state was never the main goal of the Palestinian liberation movement. This is something very new. This is not something very old. That the PA has inserted as a main Palestinian demand for obvious reasons. It makes sense, and I'm not criticizing here the PA on this. It makes sense for the PA to say that its existence is only because it would lead to a state. Because if it doesn't say it, the only reason you have the PA is to help the Israelis to oppress the Palestinians. And you can't say that. So you say that the PA is a natural progression towards statehood. Some of us believed in it for a while. I think very few of us, apart from noted exceptions I mentioned before, do. Now, that's the first point. The second point is that I don't think that you are talking about the Palestinian groups when you say how they react to a state and so on. I think that the problem of fragmentation is that the peace process, or the so-called peace process since 1993, reduced in the minds of peace activists Palestine into the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and reduced the Palestinians into the people who live under occupation. And a lot of things made sense if you thought that Palestine is only the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and if the Palestinians are only the people who live under occupation. Then it made a lot of sense. And I think the BDS in this respect is not working against the state or against the policies of the PA necessarily. What it does, it universalizes the Palestinian experience by saying that any act of discrimination against the Palestinians is worth a boycott, divestment, and sanction reaction to it. which is much better than anything that was done before. And I think in this respect, I'm not worried about the BDS as being outside this framework. On the contrary, I think that there is, and I talked about it before, there is this problem of getting out of a fragmentation that you did not desire and you are not responsible for it. But what you cannot allow yourself as a Palestinian is to say, what can I do? I'm fragmented, so I will just take care about the people I live within, that is the West Bank, or I will just take care of the Gaza Strip. And I think the Palestinian members of the BDS very much present this unwillingness to subject to the fragmentation. And I think a lot of people on the ground in the West Bank, it's very interesting. If you want one indication for what goes on, that is the following. You know, 3 years ago, if the Hamas and the Fatah would have reached an agreement, this would be big news in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Really, this would be something to celebrate, to say maybe a new period has started. The Hamas and the Fatah have reached an agreement. Very few people in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank are interested in this anymore. Because politicians, whether they talk in the name of Islam or nationalism or secularism or liberalism, have lost their attraction to many, many people. And they find it very difficult to face the fact that there are undercurrents and new forces that are emerging that see unity not just as a unity between that political faction or that political faction, but the unity of the fragmented Palestinian reality as one. And this is a process I can see on the ground, but it takes time. It takes time. I'll give you another example when you know that this is moving forward. When the Palestinians in Israel would give up the idea of having a parliamentary representation, which doesn't benefit them and only benefits Israel. That will be the next stage to look at. That's the next arena in many, many ways. Of returning the Palestinians in Israel to the Palestinian reality and not playing the Zionist, the liberal Zionist game of saying, you see, you elect, you are being elected. Do you know of any people in the Arab world who elect or are being elected? And that goes together with gay rights and women's rights. So we won't go that avenue. But I think that's for me is very important to mention. When you are dispossessed in the way you were dispossessed in 1948, you cannot reduce your struggle to the idea of a mini Bantustan in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip as a rectification, not only for the Nakba of 1948, but for the ongoing Nakba since 1948 until today.
Okay, there's lots of people waiting to ask. There was one around the corner first.